Hello everyone and welcome! So, throughout the last year, some things became clear. For example, Riot became better at storytelling. With every new champion released, they also gave us some fresh lore. But there are some exceptions. Despite all the hype that Jhin brought up, Riot decided to keep most of his story hidden. And so, we don't really know anything about him. All we know is that Zed, Shen and his father were tracking down a criminal that turned out to be Jhin. Then they caught him and they imprisoned him. After a while, someone decided to use Jhin as a weapon and so they released him. That's his full lore. I'm a bit sad that they didn't bother to answer some of the questions that would make Jhin more relatable. For example, why is he half a robot? Why does his shoulder work as a reload mechanism for his gun? What actually drove him mad? How did he lose his eye? Why doesn't the story say anything about the encounter between Jhin and Shen's father? Did they seriously just find him and catch him? Now, you may argue with me and say that Riot will release these answers in some future lore update. And knowing how Riot trolls me sometimes, they might, but I don't think they will, and here is why. Do you remember this guy? I was so hyped for Tahm Kench. Finally, a champion that seems to have a huge impact on other characters. Not only that, but he also appears to be a demon. And up until now, demons didn't really exist in this world. Tahm Kench is now few months old and he still has only few lines of lore. And his update is nowhere to be seen. Riot is mostly using the new champions as a way to push the lore forward. But sometimes they do the smart thing and they use their old champions instead. The best example is Gangplank. Today I want to show you 5 champions that have outdated lore, but they still have huge potential for great story. Because most of these champions have very short stories, I will cover them quickly and then I will tell you how they could be turned into very important characters. So without further ado, let's start with number 5. Shaco. His old story was very simple. No one really knew what he was. Some thought he was a demon from another world, and some thought he was the manifestation of sins. It is assumed that he actually was just a mad assassin for hire. That is all we know from his old lore. It is a shame that this character was left behind, because when Jhin was released, I was glad that we have a great psycho character in the game. And then I remembered, don't we have Shaco? I personally think that Shaco would be a better character if he was not a human. We have so many cool mysterious races in the game already. The Voidborn, the Darkin, the Ascended, the Undead. I think that Shaco would be a great myth similar to Kindred. Something that everyone believes in, but no one has really seen. But if Riot decides to keep him as a human, I think he would be a great double agent. Wouldn't it be cool if Shaco was one of the politicians in Ionia? Perhaps the mysterious one that even gave the order to release Jhin. And on his free time, he would be the merciless killer we know him as. There are so many cool ways you can tie these characters into the lore without creating a new branch. I really wonder if Riot decides to do something with him or if they just leave him behind. At number 4, we have a character with much bigger lore potential, Nocturne. Nocturne's old lore is a bit more complicated, but still, it is not too deep. Nocturne was a shade that started appearing in the dreams of people all over Runeterra. This was relatively harmless, since all he caused were just nightmares. That was until an explorer passed out next to a Nexus in the old Twisted 3 line. Since the Nexus is a beacon of summoning powers, it was able to bring Nocturne into the real world. And that is when the real killing started. Fortunately, the summoners were smart enough to realize that if they kill Nocturne, he might just return back to the world of dreams. And so they imprisoned him inside a Nexus fragment, and they used him in battles. As you can see, Nocturne had a pretty good idea behind him. But since the summoners pretty much just banished him, he couldn't really do anything. I think that Nocturne would be a great addition to the Shadow Isles, and here's why. If you remember one of my previous videos about Mordekaiser, you can notice some similarities. Nocturne as well as Mordekaiser are both just shades of their former bodies. They both wear armor that keeps their bodies in form, and they both seem to be immortal. I would love it if Nocturne was another person brought back to life using the same necromantic spells they used on Mordekaiser. Perhaps because he was brought back with the powers of someone else than Mordekaiser, he would have his own will. And I think it would be cool to have a roaming shade with the same powers of Mordekaiser, but without an army. Again, I wonder when will his time come. Number 3. Fiddlesticks. Of all those 3 nightmarish creatures, Fiddlesticks had by far the coolest lore. Few decades ago, right after the Rune Wars, there was a powerful mage from Zone called Istvan. He became one of the first legendary summoners of League of Legends. He was always trying to challenge his own powers, and he was always trying to summon stronger champions. One day, he sealed himself inside the summoning chamber and he started casting forbidden spells. Suddenly, there was nothing but silence. Few summoners went in to investigate what happened. The first apprentice that entered was cut down with scythe. The others that escaped were driven mad by fear. All they could see before their eyes were crows and death. The summoners quickly sealed all exits from the chamber. Since Istvan himself wasn't powerful enough to control Fiddlesticks, they decided to keep him locked in and they used him as an executioner. The reason why his lore was so cool is because Fiddlesticks was the only champion that had powers greater than the ones of the summoners. I would love it if they brought Fiddlesticks back as an embodiment of fear. The problem is, where do you put him? Probably not Shurima, definitely not Freljord. The Shadow Isles has already few of these. I don't think he would fit in as a scientific experiment, so the only place he would fit in is Noxus. Noxus has already brought back or summoned few powerful creatures. The best example is Scion. Fiddlesticks would be a great prisoner banished inside Noxus, as Noxus itself is technically home to the necromantic powers used on Mordekaiser. At number 2, we have the Titan himself, Nautilus. His story is very simple and yet it could be really deep. Nautilus was a crew member on a ship that was scouting around the Guardian Sea. One day they found a black oozing liquid floating on top of the water. No one was brave enough to investigate, and so Nautilus decided to do it himself. He put on a heavy diving suit and he slowly approached the edge of the ship. Suddenly, something emerged from the liquid and it grabbed Nautilus. He was still holding onto the railings and so he started rocking the entire ship. The rest of the crewmen were afraid that he would take them all down with him. And so, they wrenched his grip free of the rail. As Nautilus started sinking down, he grabbed the anchor in desperation. Suddenly, everything went black. When he woke up, he noticed that the iron suit became part of him. Too heavy to swim or run, he started walking blindly along the bottom of the ocean until he arrived at the shores of Bilgewater. Everyone was afraid of him, and so the city he once called home abandoned him. Eventually, he found his way into the League of Legends, and that's where his story ends. Now, here is why he could become a really cool character. Nautilus was basically taken over by an unknown source of power in the middle of the Guardian Sea. This could easily be tied together with Ilawi's god Nagakeburos. As you probably know, Nagakeburos is a god that pushes the world forward. No matter what he does, he always does it for greater cause. What if he transformed Nautilus into this titan in order to fight a greater threat in the future? Perhaps Nautilus could fight the creatures of the void, or perhaps the Frozen Watchers themselves. I don't think it is healthy to create a titan in the story without a purpose. And so, I really hope that Riot has a cool story for him. And at number 1, we have two characters that have incredible potential for a great story, and yet Riot left them behind. Of course, these two are Malzahar and Kassadin. Both of them have really short stories that are bound together, so I will go through them quickly. Malzahar was a gifted Shuriman seer that used to look into the future and warn the citizens of upcoming dangers. But one day, his gift showed him something more. He started seeing pieces of puzzle that slowly started showing him the way to unimaginable powers. His visions showed him a hidden ruined city called Ikathia. When he finally arrived there, he saw a rift leading to the void. But he was not afraid of the void. Instead, he welcomed it. And that is how Malzahar became the host and the summoner for the void creatures.
Ikathia beckons.
Kassadin was also a seer, but unlike Malzahar, he found the way to Ikathia through the passion for forbidden knowledge. When Kassadin arrived at the rift, he saw all the horrors that the void contained. He tried to escape, but the void started to pull him in. He did not have the strength to fight it, but he was not willing to let it consume him. So, he went with the only viable option. He consumed the void. He let it rush in, but through the power of his own will, he gained control over the void. Now, Kassadin serves as the guardian of Valoran, fighting the creatures of the void and trying to spread the word about the dangerous creatures inside. This is all that we know about them. And I really hope that there will be more. Malzahar and Kassadin are not just enemies. They are the ultimate battle between the good and evil. They both wield the same dark powers, and they battle each other for the future of this world. As a bonus, since all of these events are happening in Shurima, the ultimate battle against the Void could be between the Void creatures and the Ascended. Imagine Renekton and Nasus fighting alongside each other against the Titan of the Void, Cho'Gath. If you ask me, there is a potential for a great story. But sadly, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed this talk, feel free to give this video a like, and if you want, you can put a topic that you are interested in down in the comment section. Also feel free to follow me on both Twitter and Facebook. Thank you all so much for all of your support, and as always, thank you come again. I've got few more updates for all of you that stayed here. Number one is that throughout this week, a technician will come to my home and he will try to upgrade my internet, so maybe I'll be able to stream. We'll see if we can do something with that. And also, I guess today is Valentine's Day, so I love you all. What else should I say? I may not be here because, you know, it's Valentine's Day, but still, I hope you all have a great day. And, you know, since it started, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the year. So see you next time.